The moment I saw this post online, I knew it was going to be a video. And the way that poster phrased it is multiple siblings can grow up in the same house with the same parents and have completely different childhoods. Obviously, we can interpret that a number of ways. When you grow up in the same house, it's possible that in my case, you have a full brother, you have the same parents, one of them being an absent parent, but because we have a mildly significant age gap, our experiences are going to differ from many points. For instance, with him being 5 years older than me, one of the things that I'm going to interject because I realized that during the whole video I never mentioned this, but my brother was special needs. So for some years, he needed to be at the doctor's office a lot. He needed to get a lot of therapy for some developmental things. Therefore, my time was affected a lot by my brother's health needs, and I had to be pretty much a waiting room baby. And the way that I passed that time was with games, of course. But looking back, that was pretty isolating because I had to self entertain while the adults were dealing with the stress of my brother's needs. And my brother, from that perspective, he can claim that super early on in his life, he had doctors, counselors, teachers who were accommodating him and being available for him, being closer with him. Whereas I, as someone who's not special needs and I'm a straight A person, then that tendency to neglect me by adults was there. And at the time, it didn't affect me because I saw it as, look at me, I don't cause problems. The adults don't have to worry about me. But the problem is that meant that I was, again, pushed away, isolated, left independent. Who was cultivating things with me? And I think that's where a degree of my cold demeanor started developing from in those early years. Whereas my brother got the accommodations, the coziness, the warm stuff because he needed it and I didn't. And I never really thought about the effect that would have until now. And maybe that's why, as an adult, as opposed to me taking the reins and having the tendencies of being a leader, I tend to be a follower who helps the leader persevere because I was not developing leadership skills. I was developing independent skills. And those are not the same. He can claim is that he experienced a handful of years with our parents together. I never experienced our parents being together because I was conceived during a reconciliation attempt. Therefore, for me, I have experienced nothing but the broken home, whereas my brother, at least during his first impressionable years, he experienced the togetherness of our parents, however togetherness looked for them at the time, despite that time already signifying some of the breakdown of the relationship, which, if you ask me, I may be misremembering, but it's very possible that by the time my brother was conceived, they were already having problems. But I'm not sure. I sincerely cannot remember that detail. I'm just trying to piece things together. If I was conceived during a reconciliation attempt and they had been with my brother for 5 years already, then I would imagine that's a pretty good guess. I could ask them, but sometimes to talk about this subject is a little discouraging because sometimes it turns into one parent describing themselves as the victim and how they were in survival mode. And I sincerely don't like that because you have already expressed that. It's time to move on and address the issue from a different perspective. So with my brother, having lived those years with my parents, at least he had a home where there were two incomes. In my case, there was only one income. And you could see the difference. When it comes to the social element, when my brother arrived, him being the firstborn, it was like he was the superstar of our parents' social group because it's the first one, the first impression. They shared that together. Despite my father having had my eldest brother, who I told you guys passed away, my dad has admitted that he didn't really indulge in parenting until he met my mom because my mom was able to guide him on how to parent. Because my father, from what I hear, he was an absolute utter disaster. He had no paternal sense, paternal instinct whatsoever. And during his first marriage, I guess that wasn't something that was cultivated because the woman he was with wouldn't really know how to guide anybody, and let alone someone with my father's character. So it took, I guess, someone like my mom with a similar character, if you look for it, to sort of, I guess, balance each other out. Now, when it comes to the actual content of our childhoods, I can tell you that for me, school was a trip because we ended up moving many times compared to the moves he experienced. I cannot count with precision how many times my brother was moved from different schools, but mutually we moved to a different school. So we had him transferring from his high school when I transferred from my middle school. After that, we completed our school in the new district that we moved to. Something I should mention around this time that is significantly different from my brother is my brother actually graduated late. He was supposed to belong to the graduating class of a certain year, but he ended up belonging to the graduating class of a year after because this district we moved to did not accept some particular credits that he was supposed to have obtained by the time he reached this grade level. Therefore, they forced him to repeat a school year. And needless to say, my brother was absolutely utterly pissed off because he had already envisioned and planned for his graduating year. But then he experienced this delay, and let's just say that after that, my brother's demeanor and attitude really, really started to change for the worst. And when I think about it, I can understand why that would be hurtful because on paper it looks like you failed, even though he had good grades. But the reason I point that out is because I didn't get to experience one of the high schools that my brother experienced. Even if it was very short lived, there is that gap where I have experienced more different schools than he has. But it's possible that in his early childhood, he may have evened out with me because I don't know the details of his early years. It's possible that my parents had to move too, and I just don't know that information. But at least as a more developed, older kid, like say I was already like past age 10 and not in my formative years where I wouldn't remember anything, wouldn't remember anybody, then I feel like that is a detail that is worthy of mentioning. In addition, I always heard that my brother obviously did not take my parents' divorce well at all. And he was imploring my mom to not leave my dad, but of course, my brother, at that age 5, you can't really understand what it is like for two adults who ain't getting along to be in close proximity. That's just not healthy. The rupture is as unhealthy as staying with the person is as unhealthy. You just gotta pick the lesser of the two evils. This is something that didn't show any indications that it was going to get better, then you have to get away from it. And so for me to arrive into the world with my parents pretty much separated already, I arrived during, you could say, the divorce was in a sense frozen. Like I said, reconciliation attempt. It finished processing maybe when I was like a year, 2 years old. And for me to arrive during a time when two people are breaking up, I can tell you that the way people treated me was significantly different than the way my brother was treated, especially from the stories I hear. Because with me, given that there were so many lies spread about the circumstances of my arrival, one of the first things that happened was that my father is the kind of man who's very easy to influence. It's very easy for you to put ideas into his mind that he's going to believe, and also put, I guess, impulses in him that he otherwise wouldn't have had. He's the kind of person who, let's say that you don't like peanut butter, but someone tells you about this really kick ass peanut butter milkshake. For some reason, even though you don't like peanut butter, you're curious about it and you wish to try, you wish to indulge because your friend is telling you it's the best damn thing ever. That's how my father is, or at least I could say was during those times. I can't speak about how he is nowadays. Maybe he's still the same. Maybe that's a character trait he changed. But sometimes, once you reach adulthood and you have certain tendencies, unless you have them addressed, you never really change. But I can tell you that one of the things that he was being told is that my father was not him, that I was somebody else's kid. And I had to pay for that by life's humor in the form of I could not look more like my fucking dad. And I guess that was helpful because not only was the paternity test going to happen anyway, but on top of that, it's like, you see me, you see his face, why are you questioning the obvious? So it's like, it served as double embarrassment, at least for him, because I'm little. What do I fucking know? What do I fucking feel at that time? But I can tell you that as I grew up during my early childhood, I could feel that tension in the air. Not necessarily about me existing, about my presence, but I could feel that fairly recently there was a history with my parents. Around age 5 and 6, it had only been, only half a decade since the separation events. So there were still residue of whatever the story was as it was spreading around my parents' social circle. And needless to say, I can tell you that I remember growing up and there being certain figures present who would upset my mom. Like, it would generate a special kind of stress in her. And now, as an adult, I understand the names that she used to mention and how she described those people. And now, as an adult, I have a social life to manage myself. I know that those people were toxic. These were all women. The women who are just there for that tea. It's like they feed off someone's downfall, the failure of another woman's relationship. And in some cases, they even get involved with that same guy too, who the woman experienced the failed relationship with. Therefore, my mom had to keep them at a street light's arm length away, if you want to look at it like that. I don't say a mile away because she doesn't have access to an object that can be measurably that long. When you look back at times like that, with your own adult experience and you having processed your childhood and arrived at certain conclusions, when I see something like this about how my brother and I have completely different childhoods, it's very easy for me to visualize such a statement now, because had I been told that some 15 years ago, I would have denied it a little bit, but I would have accepted that my paternal side definitely accepted my brother more, accepted him better. And it also helps that he put an effort into seeking them. I didn't put an effort into seeking them because every time I hung out with them, my brother got most of the attention, and the way that I was treated was significantly different. Like, sure, they would get me gifts, they would feed me the same, they would, I guess, try to entertain me the same. But I noticed that because I was a girl, the standards for me were different. It was like, you're raising a lady, therefore, you have to treat her differently. You have to hold her up to a different standard. And an example of that would be my appearance. I was always criticized for my looks. I was fat, and I was the kind of kid who, I was not a diva type. I was very tomboyish. Therefore, for a family that's very conservative and very religiously driven, that was unacceptable. Me playing with video games, me ditching the Barbies and opting for other kinds of action figures instead, that was deeply unacceptable. As a result, I feel like my development was arrested a little bit because I wasn't, depending on where I was, able to fully be myself. The only place I could embrace fully being myself was with my maternal side. They didn't care what I ate as long as I ate. They didn't care what I wore as long as I had clothes on. And they didn't care what toys I had as long as I was entertained. That was liberating. And it's the kind of freedom that is important because I am gravitating toward those objects and things because I'm finding myself. I'm finding my identity. The difference between my maternal and paternal side is very easy to sum up. My paternal side wants to decide for me. My maternal side lets me decide. And they intervene only if it's necessary. Like if I'm about to drink fucking bleach, I never really did this, but just to give you an example. If I'm about to do something dangerous, they're going to stop me. They're going to protect me, of course. So with my brother, again, the superstar status impressed one side of the family more than the other, I guess. And I guess because my brother experienced a handful of more stable years, that left an impression on that side of the family. Therefore, my brother was embraced more than my eldest brother ever was. And I'm not saying that my eldest brother was not loved by that side of the family. I'm just saying that because of the relationship dynamic between my parents, my family's perception of my eldest brother and his situation and his outcome was different from what my brother experienced. And for me, it's definitely different because I'm a girl. And on top of that, the family was also buying into the possibility that I was not part of their family. The whole I'm somebody else's kid part. So, although my mom did a hella good job about protecting me from those details, we really didn't talk about this until I was like maybe 9, 10, 11 years old. I think I was able to go through that stage in my childhood pretty unscathed, but it doesn't mean it was completely free of consequence because, like I said, I could feel the tension in social settings. I could feel the way that people would look at me, the way that their tone would be a little different toward me. But I can also tell you that I benefited from the genuine friends that my mom had who were empathetic people. They showed me kindness and tenderness. I can say that my mom had some really good figures who demonstrated the opposite. And to be completely blunt and honest with you, her guy friends were the ones giving me my place. They were the ones making me feel, I guess, princessly. Whereas the women, she had very good women friends. I'm just saying that she had better guy friends than women friends. And I guess I inherited that same fate or curse because even as an adult, I can tell you that the handful of female connections I have that are good are fantastic. They're great. They're all I need. However, when it comes to gravitating toward guy friendships, I like those because I feel like those are the ones that are most fortifying. They are the ones that are most, you could say, they cultivate important character traits I need to possess to be strong. I have met the calm and patient man, the tender man, the generous man, the strong man, the leader man. And with women, the best female acquaintances I have had are the critical thinkers, the ones that are zero bullshit, they take accountability, and they don't spend time trying to justify the way of things. They accept it the way they are, and whatever needs to be fixed or addressed, they get on it, regardless of how demanding or impossible the task feels. They're like bulls. They hit it right on. Whereas the female dynamics that frustrate me are the gossipers, the salty ones, the ones who think that they know everybody, like all men are the same. Just because you're miserable, just because your relationships failed and you never talk about what was wrong with you, but you very easily can talk about what was wrong with him, I'm not interested in you unless you can talk to me about what you did to potentially fuel somebody's bad behavior. Now, it is possible for you to encounter someone who naturally has bad behaviors, and I'm not saying that you're responsible for fixing that. I'm just saying that if you experienced a time in the relationship when things were working, can you talk to me about what changed? What made it change? Because sometimes you have a hand in that more than you think. And the breakdown of a relationship is always the fault of two people. And sometimes you could have been trying to do the right thing to fix a relationship, but maybe you lacked the courage to do more, to be more, to demand more, to ask more, to do more that requires you to exit out of your comfort zone. And I can say that because I have been there. There are things that I'm like, okay, even though I did experience these challenges that were harmful for the relationship and I was trying to rectify them, there was a lot of times when I remained quiet because I was afraid of how the other person was going to react. Rightfully so. I wasn't safe. I don't deserve to be in an unsafe situation. And that is what my brother, as a 5-year-old, could not understand. That my mom was not afraid of saying things the way they were, but my father had an explosive temper, a violent one, and my mom also decided that she was going to defend herself from that. And unfortunately, her tactic was to match his energy. But if she did it to survive an incident, then good, she's alive. She had to make that happen. But I'm just saying that he, I'm sure, saw that, he heard that, he witnessed that. But I think he doesn't understand how prolonged exposure to that would have been detrimental for him. He only knows about the experience that he inherited because we're on the other side of it now. But had we stayed in something like that and say, my arrival, was I going to be safe? Would I have been born with a deformity because my father was physically abusive toward my mom? I could have been born disabled. I could have not been born at all. I could have been stillborn, died right there. What about my mom and her health when a pregnancy is something very dangerous? If you experience a miscarriage, especially at later stages, that is especially dangerous. And if you guys wonder how I'm very comfortable sharing these details, is because these are details that my mom has shared broadly with people over the years. And I'm sure that she would be grateful that I am sharing these details in a way that is constructive. Constructive for me, and also constructive for me building up the relationships that are meaningful for me. This is something that telling you guys about it helps me rehearse for when I may need to face it again, talking about my personal life. Because there are some things that I do have to face that I haven't gotten around to. And I personally can tell you that I have learned a lot from listening to other people share their stories about the things that they inherited, problems from their parents, problems from their grandparents. And a lot of those things I wouldn't have thought about had it not been for that source of information that maybe in real life I'm too timid to request from people I actually know. And sometimes the person may invite me into such a conversation by initiating it, or sometimes I may not get around to it at all because the person doesn't really say it. And when they do say something and I expand on it, they may tell me, hey, if you want to know more, feel free to ask. But I never really push that button because it's just not something I do. I like for things to just progress organically. I can tell you that had I had this conversation maybe some 5, 6, 7 years ago, had I been sharing this, I would have been bawling my eyes out because for some reason, this is something that I couldn't talk about without feeling a degree of shame, a degree of guilt. But the thing that helped me, and I hope this helps one of you out there if you're trapped with thoughts like this haunting you, is tell yourself that it was not your fault. Because I didn't realize how much guilt I was carrying with me until I just sat by myself and I thought, what is it that I'm feeling exactly? And then I thought about the actions of my parents that always hurt me. And I said, okay, I was the recipient of those hurtful actions and words. What led up to that? And when I think about it, I'm like, none of those things that I went through were my fault. I didn't deserve to get called ugly. I didn't deserve to be called bat mouthed, like potty mouthed, or a dumb bitch, anything like that. I needed love, affection, patience, and those were things that I received very scarcely. That's not my fault. I missed out on it. It affected my development. It resulted in this. This is what I am. This is what I inherited. How do I move past that in the present? And that is why a topic like this is very important for me, because I feel like the way I processed it is meant to be different from the way my brother processes it, because these are individual journeys. We share parents, we shared a home in our childhood, but obviously when we become adults, we branch out based off what we inherited, based off what raised us and what cultivated us. What are we going to do with that? My brother went through those experiences. He has to face them, and he has to equip himself with the tools to deal with it. In the same manner that I went through that, I carry my burdens, and in my adulthood, it is my responsibility to accept that shit, to carry the burden up to a certain point until I receive the tools and the weapons and the mental reinforcement that I need to liberate myself from those chains. And at least I can tell you that on a mental and emotional level, I'm not totally there yet, because anytime I go through something that threatens me, say my health declining, I had my moments when I bawled my eyes out and I was like, this is happening to me because I'm alone. I don't have support. I don't have family. I don't have loving and close parents. They don't check up on me every day, blah, blah, blah. But then I said, you know what? That doesn't matter, because I have selected family among friends. And I don't think it's fair on my friends who are very present, very invested in my present, to feel like no matter what they do is never enough, because my parents' investment is the only one that I'll validate. No, my friends deserve every little bit of validation that they earn, and I want them to feel it, and I tell them. I took the time to express all that, to finally get back to the core of the topic, which is same house, same parents, different childhoods. I think my childhood was ruptured from the start. My brother's childhood became ruptured. As a result, that's going to lead my brother down a path that has to look very different from mine. It doesn't make his tragedy worse than mine. My tragedy is not worse than his. And the reason I can say it like that is because at the end of the day, if we think about this critically, we both lost. We just lost at different times, and we lost different things, but we are united by loss, rupture, tragedy. We just need to figure out how to turn that into our weapon. Make that the thing that unites us and fortify us. My brother hasn't done it with me. I have not done it with my brother. But should the day come, and I think this will happen the day that our parents perish, or maybe it'll happen during their lifetime, but maybe something catastrophic has to happen for that to become a thing. I think that'll be the day that we stick together, finally. But if that doesn't happen, maybe it's because it's not meant to be, because my brother developed a character that's significantly different from mine. Ideology is different from mine that I would never entertain. And it's very possible that I would be a toxic presence in his life, the same way that to me, he has been a toxic presence in the past. I'm not judging him presently based off what I experienced in a past with him, but I'm just saying that I'm not going to sit here and romanticize that my brother and I are going to have this cozy, cuddly, warm, fuzzy conclusion, because it's very possible that at the end of the day, we were meant to be forged differently and we were meant to be separated. And that's fine. In his world, he'll have his achievements. In my world, I'll have my achievements. We don't need to force that togetherness to happen because, like I said, I may be no good for him. He may be no good for me. And if someone or something is no good for you, you have to discard it. And again, that is not your fault. So don't feel guilty if you have to make a decision like that and do something like that. Because our childhoods were different from how the social atmosphere was. And I think that played a huge part. I can tell you mine was full of tension. And I can tell you that during his time, it was a more lax time. It was a more jovial time, ever so slightly, but it made a difference. And he can say that he had more excursion experiences. I didn't have as many. I was very shy, timid, scared of everything, honestly. Outdoorsy stuff never really stimulated me. My brother's social life during his childhood was significantly stronger than mine. He had meaningful neighborhood friends. They were all older kids too, so they're more compatible with each other than I ever was. Anytime I would try to hang out with them, it was very obvious that I was being excluded a little bit. And it also didn't help that they were all boys. There was only one girl, but she really wouldn't float around much because I would imagine her parents wouldn't let her go out. And then our neighbors, they were more religious inclined, therefore the way that we interacted was very limited. We interacted over a fence, and maybe at nighttime we could play together to do something like hide and seek, and they were the first ones to be rolled into the house because their parents were very strict, which is good. It was something like by 7:30 or 8 they all had to be gone, whereas we were some of the last kids to be pulled into the home by around 9. So that makes a slight difference. And I can tell you that my brother having those childhood social moments helped him, but I also think that it may have forged some of his tendencies. And some of the tendencies he has is he can be impressionable. He can be influenced like my father can be. Now, when it comes to me, maybe my close mindedness and me putting up so many boundaries that helped me become, I guess, less inclined to being easily offended because I didn't have somebody trying to control the direction of my thoughts. I took over that. And fortunately for me, something that always interested me was order, discipline, truth, and science. None of those things can tolerate bullshit. Whereas maybe my brother's influences always cut him some slack. My tactic was I developed self toughness. I was always very hard on myself. And the calm and gentle people who I have met over the years, the first thing they tell me is I am very hard on myself. And like I said, these influences I have in my life currently, I think had I not had the childhood I had, isolated, cold, high boundaries, maybe I wouldn't have recognized those influences I have in my present because I know people who have been like that, super uber social, and they have severe issues with certain attitudes, like being easily offended, their arrested development shows, and lack of control of impulses. I don't have any of those issues. I'm not trying to present that as I am better and I'm superior because clearly I do suffer as a result of social isolation. But I'm just saying that if you need a case study of why some people develop certain behaviors and some people don't, if you're interested in learning about what helps someone curb those things or avoid those things from happening, I can help you. But if you want to influence someone who's like me into changing that because it is affecting the way that person is, then they need to study the people who don't suffer from that, who are social, but you also get to know the caveats that come from that, which is, hey, this can make you susceptible to being manipulated, blah, blah, blah. Whereas my issue with isolation can lead me to being lonely, unstable financially, unstable home situations, blah, blah, blah. Because everything has a price. I picked my path, I'm paying the price. And to me, it's not a burden because I did my work of studying that and myself. And that's why I'm so chill and peaceful and impossible to offend. Whereas other folks with childhoods like this, when you try to dig into it, you feel like the conversation doesn't go anywhere because all they want to talk about is how much they are the victim, but they really can't talk about the things that they learned, what came out from this. You have to be able to build from something. No matter what burned it down, what destroyed it, if you don't have the reconstruction plan, you're doomed. That's the way I see it. Well, there you guys have it. That's it for me. Thank you so much for tuning in. I don't think that you expected this type of answer. If you read the title, maybe you would have expected me to talk about that elements that are more physical, like say, oh, my brother had more toys, or he had more love from my mom, or he got in trouble more than I did, and stuff like that. But for me, I'll always like to explore the psychological elements of things because childhoods can define a lot of what your future is going to be. And when I think about my childhood, I always knew I was going to be a failure, as in never have a career or anything like that. I knew that by the time I was 14. It devastated me, but at the same time, I'm happy that it turned out this way because I feel like I have been more useful this way. I have been in the places and the times that I was needed the most. And after that's over, I just pack up and go on to the next one. Okay, that's it. Bye.